It's an opportunity I'd like to use to talk about some of our schoolwork, our Global Classrooms initiative. An initiative we think is very important, but before going into it, I thought it'd be useful to actually just have a little look at what is the reality. What is the reality we're responding to across sub-Saharan Africa? And I think it's when we remember that young people make up 37% of the working age population, 60% of the unemployed. Almost half of Africa's population is under 25, which I find an astonishing statistic. Estimated that by 2050, Africa will account for 29% of all people aged 15 to 24 on the planet. And increasingly, this has been spoken of not as a problem, but as of a demographic dividend. As the rest of the world ages, Africa has an incredible opportunity to move into that space, to emerge, develop, go the route of Korea, and more recently the route of Brazil. But I think if we read the history of these countries, the recent history, always is mentioned education and how important education is to the success story. Indeed, Brazil is now currently concerned at a break going on its development because it simply does not have access to trained and skilled personnel to further develop their economy. So, a word of warning for us there. And I think all this reinforces the challenges for educators and policymakers to move quickly, to ensure the growing number of young people have the skills required to prosper and contribute their full potential to society. And I think from that starting point, it's very obvious to all of us that technology, ICT, must have a role to play in dealing with such large numbers. I don't view it as optional. Before going on further, I think just a little word about the British Council. What's our involvement in education? Well, I'd like to be clear. Our purpose, the purpose of the organisation, is cultural relations, building engagement between the UK and other countries, particularly between young people and professionals in these countries. The UK wants this contact. We want to be engaged. We want to be part of that global conversation. And to do this in sub-Saharan Africa, we focus our activities on education and English language teaching. Our single biggest programme is called Connecting Classrooms. It's part of a global initiative funded in part by UK aid, works in 16 countries across the region. A subset of that project has 6 countries in which we work as part of our now global relationship with Microsoft. And of course, I have to stress in all of them, we work with and rely on our partnerships with national ministries of education. So how do we connect classrooms, as I think the next question that emerges? And very much by ICT. We start off with giving schools access to a database in which they can learn about other schools, learn about schools that might have similar interests to themselves, not just in the UK actually, but also increasingly around the world. At the moment, we encourage a face-to-face element. Then we have an exchange of teachers and some students, obviously not all students. And then again, though, ICT quickly takes over. That's the route to exchanging materials between schools. That's the route to our databases, which give access to curricula. Schools don't have to write their own. A little search on some of these databases. Great richness in them, great opportunity to actually take for them some very helpful shortcuts. Also, though, ICT has an important training role. And if we look at our 90 digital hubs, which we've put together with Microsoft, all focus on training leaders and teachers to help them embed ICT in their work. We're ambitious in the scale of this. We have 20,000 school leaders within the next year will take part in this. 100,000 pupils, learners, will also have access. And our work is gathering momentum. It's very nice to see it driven not simply by our desire, but also actually by the desire of the schools to participate, and we think this is essential to any educational initiative. If we don't get that energy, it's probably not going to work. Achievements to date. We have over 4,000 schools in sub-Saharan Africa and the UK taking part in this activity. It lets children and teachers have an international experience. Strangely, in a more connected world, I think it's even more important to give children these contacts directly with each other to learn how each other lives. I also think that 4,000 starts to address some of those connectivity issues which Professor O'Connell mentioned with his skinny map at the start of this very workshop. We are increasing that connectivity north-south, very much our intention to continue doing so. I could go on about the numbers for quite a while, but actually there's one I'd now like to focus on because I think it's of interest to all of us. And that number is when we do our evaluations, which we do very regularly, one of the questions we ask of teachers is, does Connecting Classrooms, this huge project, improve learners' academic achievement? And the response we got was 77% said yes. And initially we were very happy with that 77%, but actually, increasingly we started to worry about the other 23%. That actually is quite a high level of dissatisfaction. And I think the evaluations that we did then revealed a message which is something for us all to think about. And the message that came across very strongly in our work was, it's not just about the technology, it's about the fit with the curriculum, and it's about the skills of the teacher to deliver the curriculum. And what has repeatedly been revealed is, if we don't make our project fit with the national curriculum, if we don't negotiate the space for it, if we don't ensure teachers have the skills to deliver it, then very quickly that technology, which we put a great effort to putting into this project, it actually becomes a burden, not an asset. We find teachers complaining about it as an extra task. We heard something of that yesterday. Extra work they have to do. Security of the equipment becomes an ever bigger issue, actually, as the more it's marginalised, the more difficult it is to actually look after it properly. Inappropriate use, and then, of course, maintenance quickly comes in. If we get that truly embedded in our projects, these problems don't go away, but they are minimised. And that, I think, is a big lesson for us in there. I think it's also worth saying, that this was in one project, but actually it set off a train of thought for us as we looked at other projects in which we involve various forms of ICT. We've heard of the fibre optic connectivity that's spreading across the region. It certainly is spreading, but it remains a distant dream for many schools. It's going to be a long time before some particularly rural primary schools will have any connection with that fibre optic cabling. So if you look at some of the other initiatives we've put in place, we've just completed a pilot in Rwanda, which we will roll out in Tanzania and a number of other countries, in which we've been using wind-up and solar-powered MP3 players. Very neat bit of appropriate technology, which actually allows us to take the message, particularly English language teaching, into the simplest of classrooms where there is no dependence upon the infrastructure of the classroom. So we loaded these MP3 players with a lot of our English language teaching content, which, by the way, for those of you who visit either our stand or our website, there is a lot of this stuff which we make freely available to anybody who wishes to use it. So please think of it as a resource. But what happened there in the evaluations, the first thing that came out was a very simple one to fix. The volume of the loudspeaker wasn't enough to actually fill a classroom. So fine, technical problem, technical solution, out of the way. But then, again, we started to look at usage of it, started to get some mild suspicion when we saw, because these things are also FM radios, that teachers were finding other uses for them, shall we say. And it wasn't just the BBC World Service. What came out again was exactly this issue about fit with curriculum. If we didn't make it easy for teachers to actually take our products and fit it to the curriculum they were being asked to teach, in general, it didn't happen. And then we also found, as we addressed that yes, we could get into the curriculum. Now what we're starting to look at is, what are the teacher skills that we wish to develop? What are the professional development programs we can put in place? In many ways, a small part of the total cost of these projects, but absolutely essential if they're truly going to have any value and any impact. The good news in this is that actually this is all very fixable. These are not big additions to these projects, it's thoughtful additions to the projects. And that's where we'll be putting considerable emphasis in coming years. So turning to this conference, I must say it's been a pleasure for the British Council to participate, to network and to learn more of the technology available to us in our work. We're quite excited about where these projects can go. Work, though, which I frequently remind my colleagues, is dependent upon our engagement with the ministries across the region. We do not act alone. It's you, the ministries, who train the teachers, you set the standards, and you pay those who do all the work. Above all, you set the direction and the strategy. And I think that's a hugely important role in ensuring the success of sub-Saharan Africa in the 21st century. To finish, I'd like to just share with you the big questions that the British Council will be working on in this coming year as we start to fine-tune some of our interventions. We start with that curriculum. Is it a relevant curriculum that meets the needs of students today? A frustration for us is when we try and fit our work into a curriculum that actually hasn't been revised for a very long time. And how do we get that fit? How do we make it actually happen? We do tend to love talking about the numbers of computers which are available in schools. We want to focus much more on the impact of teaching and learning by using those computers. And finally, that desire to create a more international world. Are we building international partnerships that do allow true and equitable sharing of the ownership of the world's knowledge? Thank you very much.